To dissect and discuss the economy in 2023, we're joined by NBR commentator Christoph Schumacher. So, Christoph, Happy New Year. What did you get right? What did you get wrong?
For the economy, a lot went wrong, and most economists got a few things wrong, especially when we look at the revised GDP figures, the growth rates that we had. We all know that we all feel that the OCR is hurting our back pocket, but we need it because inflation is still far too high. We are at 5.6% still, which is far away from our 1 to 3% target we have. So overall, the economy wasn't doing as well as we hoped in 2023.
So you've talked about monetary policy and fiscal policy being out of whack, out of kilter. Is it likely to come back into kilter this year?
Well, we would hope, and a change of government always brings a new change or new approach. But absolutely right. The Reserve Bank raised the OCR because we needed to get control over the high inflation. But that needs to go along with some fiscal tightening, not spending, which is not what happened. So on one side, we took money out of the back pocket with higher OCR rates and higher mortgage rates. But at the same time, if the government increases spending, provides more subsidy allowances and so on, then it goes back into the back pocket and doesn't help us at all to cool down the economy and get control of inflation.
So what surprised you about 23?
Well, the biggest surprise was the revision of our GDP growth rates. The fact that we all believed that the year wasn't bad, that there was no recession, that we started the year well, and then we had a 0.9% growth rate in the second quarter, which made us all feel very good. But then came the third quarter, and to surprise of almost everyone I know, that we were at minus 0.3, and Stats New Zealand revised not just this 23, but also previous years, and mentioned it had not just received new information, but changed its methodology and changed benchmarks, and suddenly the year didn't look good at all. We started the year in a recession, and our 0.9 was downgraded to 0.5 growth, and we have a third quarter of minus 0.3%. So that's not good reading at all.
Why does Stats NZ revise historic data, and how serious is that?
It seems to happen frequently. The Stats New Zealand will tell you that it's a complex procedure to calculate and measure GDP. So as more data and revised data from the different agencies come in, so does GDP change. This time around, they also said they changed something on their methodology on how to accumulate the data and calibrate values and benchmarks. I'm not quite sure why that happened right now, but it did. But we've seen revisions in the past, but these revisions were quite extreme. To a difference of 1.8% of our economy is smaller than we actually believed it was, simply through the revised figures for 23 and 22. That's substantial.
And what does this mean for the likes of the Reserve Bank and Treasury, who are trying to plot a path forward?
It's literally like driving with a dirty windscreen, because if I was the Reserve Bank governor, you set your OCR based on those economic figures, and we might have actually seen a higher OCR if those revised figures had been available earlier. So really, if you take these things into account, and they do quite seriously when determining a monetary policy, if substantial revisions happen, then we now also know the OCR wasn't quite where it should have been as well.
Okay. So in terms of the data coming out next week, the week after from Stats NZ, do we take that with a grain of salt that it may get revised down the track?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a bit more cautious now. I also know about the revisions, but not that substantial values. And yes, we need to be careful, especially when we comment on GDP figures after they are announced. most likely that's not what they will look like a few months down the track. Absolutely.
So let's look ahead at what's coming out later this month. December quarter inflation data. The RBNZ expects it to get to 5%. Then there's an OCR review in late February.
Yes, so the inflation rate is still falling, so that's good news. It's not falling as quickly as we'd like it to be, but it is falling. A small change from if we were end up with 5% from 5.6 where it is now. There are now speculations that the OCR might not stay at 5.5%. Last year, it sounded like it will be the high, but now, given that inflation is not falling as quickly as I'd like it to be, maybe there's a small increase. It's not off the table anymore, and there are speculations that a little bit more needs to be done in order to gain full control of inflation.
What weight do you put behind the hike then?
It's a tough one because it has its spillover effects into the whole economy, and especially in people who have refinanced their mortgages. I suspect, but well, the negative growth rate of minus 0.3 quarterly growth might just force the hand of the Reserve Bank next time around.
And then there's also talk about cuts this year as well.
Yes, that's what the new government said and campaigned with, is that we need to cut government spending. This is also a way to get control of inflation, because if the government spends less, people will end up spending less as well. So yes, absolutely. We need to get fiscal monetary policy back together, that if we raise the OCR or keep it high, it needs to go along with sensible fiscal policy, and some spending cuts are in order, absolutely.
So how are you picturing the economy to perform this year?
Well, if you'd asked me a few weeks back, I would have been more optimistic with the revised values. It looks like we are going in for a hard ride. If the growth rate is negative again, then we will be in another recession. So that's tough. There's not the boom we get. However, the last quarter of the year can be a bit better because people spend a bit more. And we've seen immigration figures, net immigration to New Zealand rise, and that always boosts the economy a bit. So let's hope by bringing fiscal and monetary policy closer together that 24 will be a slightly better year than 23.
Christoph Schumacher, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.